Okay, this video is going to explain how to do the programming to get a local sports broadcast on. This is going to be the most technical out of all the videos I've done so far. This is something that I wouldn't actually normally expect you to do, but if you're wanting to do this on your own, this will show you how to do it. So for the local games, there's quite a few things that have to happen. Of course, you have to have the cart that contains the sponsors that you're going to play in that game. You have to have a command that's going to go into this bottom deck to activate the game and do all that stuff. You also have to have your individual carts for your breaks. This is something that is pretty complicated because you have separate sponsors for every team, which is not how we do it here in Sheridan. In Sheridan, we have a local sports package, and that same package plays for every game we do. That way, we only have one set of automation commands, but you have one for every team. And in fact, you have sometimes two or three for the teams, depending on whether they're playing each other and stuff. So this can get quite complicated, but this video will hopefully show you how to do it. So the first thing you need is the sponsor cart that contains the sponsors for that particular team. You've already done that. I have a video showing how to do that. We're going to go ahead and do the stuff for Newell here. NSP is the cart that you have made that contains the sponsors for Newell. And so now we need to do the rest of it. And we'll just kind of work our way from this level back up to the main level. So the first thing we need to do is create the playlists that will allow it to take the 30-second breaks, the 60-second breaks, the 1 minutes, or the 2 minutes and the 4 minutes. And the easiest way to do that is to just take an existing one and duplicate it. So what we're going to do here, I'm just going to quickly look at one of the others. We can just go to FM deck 1, and this is the stuff that's in that bottom deck. And you can see that what it's doing here for these games, it's loading a playlist into deck 6 called DR10, and then BFTL for Belle Fourche. And you can see that that's the difference, HUL for Hewlett and so on. This DR10 was the name of the phone interface that you were using, so I just named them based on that. That's just going to have to stay that way. I'm not going to go through and change these myriad of playlists just to change the name of that. So DR10 doesn't really mean anything anymore, but that's why it's named that way. So let's just look at like the Hewlett one, for example. If we load DR10, HUL, and TL is for Tie-Line, because at one point we had separate versions for phone and Tie-Line, so we had double the amount. This did get incredibly complicated for a while. You have by far the most complex local sports sponsorship program I have ever seen. In fact, at the National Association of Broadcasters, they hammered into us, do not sell sports this way. But here we are. We're doing it this way, and so this is what we've got. So you can see that this is the actual commands that run the game here, that actually get the game on. It loads some remote control modes and things like that. The main thing we're looking at right now, though, is it's loading these into decks 2, 3, and if we go into here so we can see more of it, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are going to be these, actually 2, 3, 4, and 5 are going to be your sponsorship carts. And so here we have HSP 30, HSP 60. That's Hewlett Sports 30, Hewlett Sports 60, and so on. So let's load HSP 30. This is the 30-second commercial break for Hewlett. If we look at that, this is what you see on the deck here when it says start this deck for a 30-second Hewlett break. So what it does is that this indicator 23 switches the Tie-Line audio off, and then it plays cart HSP. This is your cart that has your sponsors in it. When that cart is done, it switches the Tie-Line audio back on, and then it just reloads this cart back into the deck. So we need to make Newell versions for this. The only difference between the HSP 30 and the HSP 60s and so on, let's take a look at HSP 60. It just plays HSP twice. So it plays 2 sponsors instead of 1. And you can see HSP 120 is going to have 4 of them in there. So that's the only difference between the 30s, 60s, 120s, 240s is how many times it plays these spots. So it's just taking cart HSP and playing it 4 times. And the way Audio Vault works, if you link that up, it's going to link it as a single element, and that way it rotates through the carts like that. So we need to make Newell versions of this. So the easiest way to do that is just to load HSP 30. We're going to expand that. We're going to go to Save As, and we're going to save this as NSP 30. And then we want to change the description on it to Newell. In fact, I guess I have it capitalized just to make it stand out a bit. We also need to change our description here on this comment line. That way you know by looking at the screen that you've got the right sponsors loaded. This is what you see on the screen here. And this should be capitalized. And then we need to change the cart that it plays here from HSP to NSP. And we also need to change the fact that it loads the cart again to make sure it loads the correct cart again. So now we have a 30-second Newell break programmed. Now, the easier thing to do now is to save this as NSP 60, because we don't need to change our descriptions or our comments other than to change the 30 to a 60 here. And then we need to copy and paste our NSP in there, and we need to make sure that it loads the 60-second version at the end. Okay, we've got our 60s in there. Let's go ahead and make a 120. Oh, and I guess this description here I didn't change on the other one. This is not that vital, but I should probably go back and fix that. Okay, and then the 120 needs to read. I think I have this set as, I think I have it 2 minute. I think is how, oh my gosh. 2 minute. I think that's how I have it. Put that in there a couple more times and load 120. That's 120 and then 240. Let's go through and change this. This will be the 4 minute. Move my keyboard here. I'm typing sideways. 4 minutes. And then I don't know why, but you have an 11-second spot in there, which is making the 4 minutes actually 3 minutes and 44. But 240, okay. And then I did have to go back and fix my 60 here. Let's do that real quick. An SP60. My description on that is wrong. Okay, so now we have all of the commands that go into these upper decks for your 30-second, 60, your 2 minute, and your 4 minute breaks. Those are now in there. We have to now create a command that's going to load those in there, and that is our DR10. And we can just go ahead and load HUL-TL. This is the Hewlett one. We'll just save a copy of this and change it to Newell. So we're going to change this to N-TL. And then we just go through and modify this. So start this deck to manually switch to Newell. Oops, I had the caps lock key on. I was holding down Shift. All right, and so now we need to go through and change what it loads in here. These commands here are all the same. These indicators just do some audio switching. They feed audio down the tie line. They make sure that the satellite screen has audio playing through it and it's not muted. I'm not going to go into the intricate under the hood programming that defines what indicator 24 and indicator 17 do. This video is probably already technical enough. But all of these indicators are basically just audio switches and things like that. So what we need to do is look at this line right here. This is the one we need to change. So it's going to load into deck 1. That's what load list 1 means. We're going to do a DR10 abort dash Newell. Now, there's an abort playlist we have to create as well, and I'll show you that here in a moment. Load list 2, this needs to be NSP30. Into deck 3, we stick NSP60. Into deck 4, we stick NSP120. And into deck 5, we stick NSP240. And then the ending playlist is actually the same for all of them because it doesn't care what decks are loaded. It just unloads everything and puts it back to normal. So there is just one ending playlist for all the games. That's the only thing we don't have to make separate versions of for every team. So there we go. And then one more thing to change here is we just want to make sure that the message it puts up on the screen is correct. And I guess I had an asterisk in there just to make it a little more fancy. All right. So let's change our abort playlist. There is a DR10, abort-HUL. And the reason we need a separate version of this is because the abort, which is when you need to abort the stuff, you stop here and then you click this start button. The reason I have to do that is because the audio switching that happens when you go into, I'll just show it to you here. When you look at NSP30, the audio switching, it switches the tie line audio off, it plays the break, and then it switches the tie line audio back on. If you just click the stop button while this ad is playing, it will never switch the tie line audio back on. It'll just stop this playlist where it is, and you'll sit there with dead air. So in order to make sure that the tie line audio switches back on, I have to have a playlist in there, which is the abort playlist. And I've got a station silent here real quick. I just need to pause this and fix our problem. I've got to do a little stuff here. All right, sorry about that. I had a little off-air problem here. Okay, so what we were doing here, I was explaining that you can't just click the stop button because it'll never switch the tie line audio back on. And so I have a playlist that ensures that the tie line audio gets switched back on, and also that these decks get properly reset if you have to abort a break. And so that's what the DR10 abort playlist does. And we could get rid of the tie line switching. We don't do that here in Sheridan. The reason I had that was because when you were doing phone games, you had to mute the phone audio. And so I just did the same thing for the tie line. It is a nice safety feature because that way you don't have to worry about muting your mics every time you take a break. So it is kind of a good thing to have that in there. It just adds that complication where you need to have this abort playlist in there to make sure that if you abort a break, the audio gets switched back on. And of course, the reason you have to have a different version of this for every team is because in order to make sure those top decks get reset properly, you've got to load the decks for that specific team. So the difference here is just the decks. So we're going to go ahead and make this a DR10-N, and we're going to change what this line here does to load our Newell spots instead of our Hewlett ones. NSP30, NSP60, NSP120, and NSP240. And then there's one other thing we have to do because this playlist reloads itself. We got to make sure it loads the right version into here. So it reloads DR10 abort-N. Okay, one more thing we have to do then is add the commands to load all of these playlists into your main bottom deck. So if we go to FM Deck 1, this is the playlist that's at the bottom of that big deck. We're going to go ahead and add Newell to this. And so I'm just going to go ahead and do it alphabetically like everything else. So we need to add a Newell line here. And I'm just going to copy and paste these and modify them. That's easier than making them from scratch every time. So I'm just going to add a copy of the Moorcroft stuff right here. And we're going to change this. Oops. This is a different keyboard than I normally use. My Control and Alt keys are in a different spot than where they normally are. Okay, so we're going to modify this to Newell. NSP. Tie line. And then what we need to do here is load DR10-N tie line into deck 6. So what this does, when you click the start button on this deck, it waits for 1 second. And while it's waiting for that 1 second, it loads DR10N-TL into deck 6, which is, this is deck 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So it loads that into deck 6. Then it waits 1 second and it just starts that deck. You can manually start that. Of course, I'll just demonstrate it here. If I load DR10-N-TL, now my phone is ringing, but it's potential spam. I'm not going to answer it. Start this deck to manually switch to the game. If you just click that deck, it's going to go ahead and execute all those commands. So it just loads this, waits 1 second, and starts it. It just makes it easier for the person starting the game. They only have to click one button instead of doing several things. So there we go. If I save that, that is all the programming done. The only thing we have to do now is flip over to your KYDT screen and reload that playlist so the new version of it is in there. Let's just go ahead and get in there and do that. And it looks like Carl or somebody is in there working on stuff right now. So I will go ahead and reload that later. But all you have to do, if I just, let's go ahead and get back into the KBFS one. All you got to do is just hit the load and reload buttons and it'll load the new version in there. I'll just demonstrate that real quick. Just load, reload for that bottom deck, and it loads the new version in. So as soon as that screen is free, I'll do that, and then you will have Newell stuff listed down in the bottom, and it's all programmed, ready to go.